If you love Push Black's Black History Year, you'll love our newest podcast called 2 Minute Black History. In only 2 minutes, you'll hear little-known stories about our people and reclaim the knowledge we need to take action and advance our community. To move towards the future, you've got to look to the past. Learn the history you didn't get in school. Tune in to 2 Minute Black History every Tuesday through Friday, right on the Black History Year feed and wherever you listen to podcasts.
Unseen behind towering prison walls, a heartbreaking reality unfolds for countless Black individuals incarcerated in America. Within those cold confines, they endure a profound sense of disconnection and isolation, feeling adrift, even in the midst of others. But what many fail to realize is that this isolation, like the cruel echoes of history, is not by happenstance. It's a meticulously designed and devastating consequence of incarceration. I'm Jay from Push Black, and you're listening to Black History Year. Like its predecessor, slavery, the U.S. prison system flourishes by locking our people up. According to a 2021 Color of Justice report, 1 in 81 Black adults nationwide are serving time in state prison. Let that sink in. 1 in 81. Ridiculous, right? But that's just the beginning. When we take into account the families who also endure time apart, the impact becomes even more profound. Loved ones go through the devastating consequences of this separation, which affects entire communities on physical, emotional, and psychological and economic levels. For many incarcerated individuals, separation from their families is an imminent reality, where a simple phone call home could lead to financial ruin. Today's guest, however, innovated a solution to mitigate that isolation and connect incarcerated people with their loved ones. That man is Frederick Hudson. Frederick is a social impact entrepreneur, Air Force veteran, and formerly incarcerated person. During his 4 years in prison, he experienced firsthand the predatory nature of the $1.2 billion inmate communication industry. He chose to turn what was negative into a means to help his community and created a product called Pigeonly that is helping to ensure incarcerated folks have access to others outside those inhumane walls of prison. But before we get into this conversation with Frederick and our producer, Lynn Webb, let's hear today's history story about a man and woman who refused to be separated, not even by slavery. Check this out.
Black love is one of the strongest in the world. We love each other through the toughest of times, and the story of Uncle Levi and Aunt Aggie exemplifies this. Here's how an enslaved couple kept hope alive until they met again. Levi and Aggie lived in Georgia. The two lived on separate plantations, but often saw each other at corn shucking parties. Levi would get a pass to visit Aggie every Saturday night to dance the night away. The pair married in 1843. But their young union wouldn't last. After only a year of marriage, Levi's plantation oppressor moved to a different county and took Levi with him. The separated couple would go on to marry other spouses out of convenience and raise families, but their love for one another remained strong and constant. During Reconstruction, Levi learned Aggie was alive and married. He tried to reach her, but their obligations to their families denied their reunion. As the years went by, their love only grew stronger. As the twilight of their lives approached and their respective spouses passed, Levi and Aggie finally reunited and spent their last years together dancing and playing just as they did in their youth. The story of Levi and Aggie is tragic, yet heartwarming. Despite the myths that Black love isn't real, these two loved one another through the horrors of slavery and emerged together on the other side. Frederick Hudson, what does Black liberation look like to you?
Wow, that's a good question. Um, I think us, Black people having the freedom to move about without the mentality and the mindset of trying to always preemptively determine how am I going to get hindered or thwarted. So I just think about my own journey. I instinctively think of who's going to try to prevent me from moving forward on this, or what do I have to try to go around, or what hurdles I'm going to try to go through. And I think, you know, other, people from other communities, white people in particular, when they want to build something, just okay, I'm going to build this, right? They're not necessarily playing defense when they start. So I think Black liberation is a lot of the not having the need to play defense when we want to start or do something. We can just be on the offense and say, I'm going to put a house there, I'm going to put a building there, I'm going to put a business there, and I'm not necessarily thinking about, how I'm going to get hindered in trying to do that, get that progress.
And how would you say that the work that you do aids in achieving or speaks to Black liberation?
Yeah, I think for me particularly, I definitely serve as an example. I served close to 5 years in federal prison for distribution of marijuana, something that's legal, pretty much in major cities all across the country, particularly where I live in Las Vegas. You can go in a store and just buy marijuana, like you go into 7-Eleven and buy a soda. So, after serving federal prison time for that, I saw that there was this population of people, particularly people serving time in prison, that was very difficult for them to stay in touch and for us to stay in touch with our support network of family and friends on the outside. So that's where the idea of Pigeonly was born and the company that I started, where we built a platform that enables and helps people to search, find, and connect with an incarcerated loved one. And it was all just really trying to, solve the problem that I experienced on a personal level, where it was very difficult and expensive for me to stay in touch with my support network of family and friends. Um, so for me, going through that process and going through incarceration, getting out and starting a business, having to learn the world of the business, having to learn the language of business, having to navigate a space where a majority of people do not look like me, and definitely don't have my background, and then have to overcome those things to still bring my vision into the world and build what I thought was needed. I think definitely have been an example of how to navigate that, and because I was able to get through those doors, I've been able to open up doors for a lot of my peers as well. So that's the biggest benefit for me, is that not only did this turn into an area of employment and a way of wealth generation for my support network of family and friends, but also because of the inroads that I've made, I've been able to open up doors for others that come from my background that look like I look.
I want to dial back just a little bit because you mentioned going through your history about how you were incarcerated for 5 years for distribution of marijuana. And I'm sure the irony is not lost on you that you were incarcerated for something that is legal in a lot of the United States, including where you live, like you said, in Las Vegas.
The biggest thing is not only is it legalized, but the people who have built marijuana, huge marijuana companies. Now there's more black people getting involved in it, but in the beginning, when this started happening, it was only white folks in the marijuana business, and they were praised and celebrated for doing the same exact thing that many of us were incarcerated and penalized and fined and jailed for. But it's more of the same narrative. It's more of the same thing when if I'm white and I say so, right? So if I say it's fine, it's fine. If I say if I say it's not fine, it's not fine, right? So there's really no true rhyme or reason to it, but it's just a systematic system that we live in. That it's okay if they do something. We see the hypocrisy all the time. When from everything from interactions with police officers to interaction with someone at a bank, right? Like we live in two Americas, and black people definitely have a different plight than white America for sure.
I don't want anybody in the audience to be misled. Like, yes, while you serve 5 years for distributing marijuana, but you serve 5 years for sending marijuana, at least from what I was able to glean through parcel companies. It's not what people may picture. You were an Air Force veteran. You were honorably discharged in 2005. Like, I don't want people to misunderstand. This is totally ironic what happened to you, man.
What our business has expanded to is that we do government contracting as well, and a lot of these prison institutions now pay us for helping them process the mail that they receive and things like that. So in my way, it's like, okay, yeah, you guys incarcerated me, but now a lot of these same jails and prisons are now paying us. So I'm definitely going back and making them pay me for sure.
Now, you said that the Pigeon Lee birthed because of your experience being incarcerated and having that separation from your loved ones. And this is something that we as Black people have had to, overcome for years, dating all the way back to the transatlantic slave trade and how they basically tore apart families. Then you had just fast forward to policing and basically the industrial incarceration system and how that pulls apart families. Did any of that history play a part in the idea for Pigeon Lee?
Because the idea was born out of my personal experience of being incarcerated. I quickly saw the distinction between people who could afford to stay connected and connected with their loved ones and support no one outside, and the people who could not, and the people that I saw could not afford to stay connected. Those were the folks that even in the 5 years that I was there, I would see leave and come back, leave and come back, leave and come back. And what I didn't know is that just my general observation was backed by years and years of research that showed that communication is one of the most important factors of recidivism, right? It's a really good indicator of recidivism. And then you say, well, okay, what's the big deal about communication? Well, it's not really the issue about communication, it's the cost of communication.
And when we're talking about the cost, what are we
Yeah.
talking about?
So,
So we're talking
so
about
during that time, it could be as much as $15 for a 15-minute phone call. And when you think about the cost of a phone call, we don't even think about the cost of a phone call now, right? Because it's literally pennies on the dollar, it's fractions of pennies to use the phone. Now, when you look at this environment and you think about, well, why would the cost of prisons phones be so high? And it's mainly driven because the economics. So basically, contracts are awarded to vendors who promise the institution the highest kickback or the highest what they call commissions. So it creates a system where the bids are awarded to the company that's going to charge the most, because that kickback or that commission that's paid back to the state or paid back to the institution, that's not free money. That money is on the backs of the consumers, the people who's paying for the calls. Well, who is paying for the calls? It's not the inmate who's paying for it. It's the mom, the sister, the brother, the cousin, the auntie, the person outside. They're bearing that cost, right? And when you look at the majority of the prison population being black males, those are most of the times the breadwinners, and those the economic base for those families. So when you take that out, now you just create this loop where it just becomes very difficult to support. And then what happens is communication starts to deteriorate over the years, because you just can't afford it. If you have to choose between a prison phone bill that's a couple $100, or your light bill or your water bill or your cell phone bill or whatever, it can quickly get cut. So that's really the fundamental issue, which goes back to cost of poverty in America, and the cost of being poor is extremely expensive.
what did that deterioration of the connection, what did that look like specifically for you?
So I was fortunate where my sister, she would faithfully put $150 on my commissary books every month for my entire incarceration, right? That didn't happen for most people. But for my peers, and when you think about $150, you're like, oh, that's not a lot of money. But in there, it's everything, right? That was my ability to use the phone. That's my ability to do commissary. That's my ability to use the email system, because you pay for everything. So, and then because I had those resources, I was able to use those funds to do my research, to order magazines, to study, and use a lot of the tools that I used when I was released to actually build my business. So, it was a huge benefit to me for that. But when you look at what just, look, my peers and the ones around, folks that are around me, we look at that cost of communication. Just imagine being out of society for 10 years and then being thrown back in, and you've lost touch with all those relationships that we take for granted. So you're looking for a job or you're looking to start a new career. We immediately go to our network. We talk to the people around us. We talk to the people we know. We might talk to somebody we worked with in the past, somebody we went to school with, etc. And you say, hey, this is what I'm looking at. And they say, oh, I know somebody. You can talk to this person. Oh, I know someone. When you completely lose that, it is extremely difficult to get back on your feet. It's extremely difficult when you've lost those touch. When you say when you're first releasing, you need that first couch that you can sleep on until you get on your feet. So this is why that communication is so expensive, it's so important. And this is why when the barriers of communication are so high because they're expensive, relationships deteriorate. Just imagine someone going through something as stressful as incarceration is, and not being able to communicate with your children and losing touch with your children. Those relationships, that I mean, that's significant. It really tears apart families in a really horrible way. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what someone did to go in prison, the reality is majority of people do not have life sentences. So that means that they're going to be released at some point in the future. So regardless of how you feel about why they're there, right or wrong, that's irrelevant. I don't even focus on that. The point is this person's going to be released at some point. So the real question is, what type of person do you want to release? Do you want to release someone who has strong family ties and less likely to reoffend? Do you want to release someone who has those relationships necessary to be a productive member of society as quickly as possible? Or do you want to release someone who's isolated, has no one, has no bearing, doesn't have any anchors whatsoever, that is less likely to be successful when they're released, right? So that's the real question, um, and that's where I focused.
I'm thinking about the reason why this interview was very like important to me personally is because I have a brother who spent time incarcerated. But in speaking with him, he would talk about how just a letter, and he might only get like maybe 2 letters a month or something like that, but that would be the difference between falling back into some old habits and just holding on and having a connection and knowing that there was someone out there, and that there was a system out there for him to return to. That was really all the difference in just getting from the next day to the next day to the next day inside.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, to put it in terms that, we all deal with out here, just imagine you're going through an extremely stressful situation and you can only send a text message that's limited to, let's say you can only send it that's limited to a tweet. That's as much as you can say. And you could only get a response to that tweet within, let's say, 24 hours. And just imagine how frustrating that would be, right? And that's way better than prison communication, right? So that's so I just to give people an idea. Just imagine you're dealing with something that's so heavy, you can't see them in person, you can't pick up the phone and call them, and all you can do is write down 160 characters like a tweet. And in order for you to get a response back, it takes 24 hours to even get a response back. And trying to communicate the emotions and the mental health things that you're dealing with, and or the significant family issues that go on when these events happen. And that's you're restricted at that level of communication right here in the outside world. Most people would lose their mind with that. They wouldn't be able to cope and communicate with that. Prison is a communication is worse than that, right? So the idea that even as bad as it is, it gets restricted even more. It has significant impacts on families, significant impacts on relationships. Just imagine the person that's married, or the person that the significant other, or whoever, or the children is a really good example. Just how to try to navigate that the best you can. It's really tough. It's really hard.
We noted that in the sometime like in the early 19th century, I think it was Auburn State Prison in New York, and even Eastern State Prison here in Philadelphia, because I'm in Philadelphia. They um, developed like this whole like system for suppressing prisoners' communications, right? That became the standard bearer for how the penal systems were going to suppress prisoner communication, and now pay it forward. I think there are actually some states that are doing away with um, receiving actual tangible letters. I think like everything has to be digital or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. We're pushing pretty hard against that. So you raised up a really good point. It's a form of punishment. And it's a form of, the more I can restrict you, the more I can disconnect you from everything you know and love, the more torment you're going to be in, no mental anguish you're going to be in, which enhances and increases your level of punishment, right? So the problem is, back to my original point, is that they're doing that to people who are going to be released, right? So it needs to be less about punishment and more about rehabilitation. Get the help that you need. You need to be productive because you're going to be out at some point, right? So, I did time with a lot of people that I want them to get rehabilitated. I don't want them on the streets with my sisters and mother and cousins. I want them to get the help they need so that they can be productive members of the because I know they're getting out. That's the difference. I know you will be back out. So that's on one side, and then on the other side is, to your point about institutions being restrictive, more restrictive, particularly on mail, is that under the guise of preventing contraband, because it is true, a lot of contraband comes in through the mail, particularly, just how you have opioid abuse and fentanyl, things like that happen on the street. Everything that happens out here happens in there. The problem is with these synthetic based drugs, it's very easy to incorporate it into paper and ink and then send it in a form of a letter. And because it's so easy to get it in, it's very difficult for institutions to detect it and block it. So I met with the officials in New York regarding Rikers Island. Rikers Island, at the time when I met with them, they were on like their 13th death, and I think I was there in like August or something like that of last year. So it had only been 8 months, and they already had 13 deaths, and a lot of these deaths were overdose related, right? So this is these substances coming in, these are extremely deadly substances, and being consumed, and it's very hard to detect, very hard to block because it's incorporated in paper ink. You can't tell the difference between a fentanyl laced letter and a regular letter. So institutions have this knee jerk reaction where we're just going to start restricting mail. But then again, we just already covered the high price of that, the high cost of that. The more restrictive you are, mail is the lowest cost form of communication. It costs all it does is cost a stamp, and you can just send it. It's equal for everyone. Um, and when you restrict that, it makes it difficult. So institutions, because they have this knee-jerk reaction of trying to block and prevent contraband, which is fair, they then start restricting mail, or worse, try to digitize it, where they say, well, all mail has to be delivered to a tablet. Well, the problem with delivering mails to a tablet or kiosk or whatever devices they have in the institution is that everyone doesn't have equal access to it. And mail is and has always been a constitutional protected right. So it doesn't matter what you did, why you did it, or who you did it to. You have to, as an American citizen, you constitutionally protected to be able to receive mail, USPS mail. So the problem is when you restrict mail to digitize it and it can only be delivered to a tablet, you don't always have access to a tablet. There was this lawsuit in Florida where the tablet service was out for 2 or 3 weeks, which means no one got their mail. There was a lawsuit in Pennsylvania where they was trying to also scan and photocopy people's legal mail, which is a huge violation of attorney-client privilege. And so when we said, look, we understand the problem of preventing contraband, but we also know the importance of tangible real mail because it's equal for everyone to receive it, and it doesn't require you to have this device that you may or may not have access to 24/7. So that's our push against this whole full digitization of all mail. Number one, all mail should not be digitized, particularly your legal mail, because that's a violation of attorney-client privilege. Because you know computers and systems get compromised all the time. That's number one. Number two is when you think about how institutions are built, just from an infrastructure type of way. These are concrete, steel structures. We barely can get Wi-Fi to work well in our house. Imagine a institution that's 3, 4 levels, all concrete and steel, right? How good do you think Wi-Fi is going to work in there? When I say Wi-Fi, just to make sure the audience understands, they don't have access to the internet. This is closed Wi-Fi just for internal applications like receiving your mail and things like that. There's no internet access in the jail. Period. But for the network access, I should say, to work for the you to be able to view mail on your tablet or view mail on the kiosk, it's spotty at best, which also restricts the constitutional right to have free access to your mail. So those are some of the issues with it. And then there's some places that even have a pay to play system where in order for you to be on a tablet, you have to pay to be on a tablet. So now you've monetized again someone having access to the mail. So those are just a number of problems where, we've had took a very strong stance on this and said, look, no one has to pay for anything for mail. They can receive it. If anything, the institution needs to pay for it, but the population should not have to pay for it. And that mail should be delivered. It should be physical in their hand. It doesn't require them to have no additional devices. It doesn't require for them to pay any additional fees. They have free access to mail just like everyone else does in the country.
And that then brings you to the creation of Pigeonly.
Yeah, so basically what we do is there's two sides of the business. On the consumer side of the business, someone can go on our website, they create an account, and they can send, they can create and design a postcard, for example. So our system allows everyone to send a limited amount of mail for free. So that means even if you don't have the money to pay for it, you can send a limited amount free of charge. So you can design a postcard, you put photos on it, put your message on it, and then you can hit send. It'll then be printed out by fulfillment or not by fulfillment team, which is a full print house similar to like, like a Kinko's or, one of those type of setups. So produce the physical card, it'll ship it out, and then it'll be sent to your incarcerated loved one. If someone wants to create a greeting card, if they want to, send photos from the weekend, they can do the same thing. It'll print out, and it just really is a convenience to save someone from having to go to a Kinko's and print it out themselves, or a Walgreens or CVS to print out their photos, and then going to a post office. When's the last time you bought a stamp for anything, right? So most people, they don't have the time, and all of us, because we're on the go, we live in this digital world. We're used to doing everything from our phone. This allows you to continue that experience and then upload photos and do whatever you want to do from your phone. Hit the send button, but your loved one will still receive a physical, tangible product. So that's on the convenience side. Now, for institutions that we work with, that we contract with, in addition to that, they're also people also able just to regular handwrite their letters and send it. We process the letter, make sure it's contraband free, and then we forward that letter on to an institution. So again, if someone just says, you know what, I like to do it the old school way. I don't want to use a computer. I don't use a phone. I'm just going to handwrite my letter. That's fine too. It'll go, we process it, and that's sent to an institution, and that's also at no cost to the inmate or family member, to be exact. I realize the importance because again, I started this company out of my personal experience, so I know everyone can't afford it. However, I do believe that everyone should be able to stay in touch, right? If you have a loved one that is willing to support you through probably one of the most traumatic times in your life of being incarcerated, and I don't want the problem to be, well, I don't have the money to do it, right? So, yeah, we won't be able to give you everything, but we can give you a limited amount. At least, you can talk to them at least, 1 to 2 times a month, just to let them know you care about them, let them know that you care, that you're there for them, and that can make all the difference. Just someone from the outside reaching in and touching you can make all the difference. So, and again, that's my efforts to, improving and helping recidivism, because I know for a fact the more we're able to keep people in touch, the less likely people are going to reoffend when they get released. And that's a studied and research backed fact. So, that's the side of our company that is more impact and mission driven, in addition to us being a for-profit company.
Now, we at Push Black, while we definitely support Black liberation, another aspect of that, especially in regards to the prison system, is looking at it from a abolitionist point of view, right? Because we have a belief that the prison system is not necessary. How do you feel about that?
That's a good question. Number one, I do think prisons is necessary. There are people, yeah, I mean, and let me put some context to that. So there is a need for correction, and we do need a place in society to put people that we are afraid and cannot live with. Do I think that prisons should be designed the way they're designed, where it's just warehousing humans? Absolutely not. That's what prison should not be. What it should be is for rehabilitation. However, there does need to be a structure and a system in place where for someone to be rehabilitated for whatever crime they committed, right? Assuming they're not wrongly convicted, assuming, let's use murder for example. If someone murders an innocent person, that person has an issue. And that person needs help, right? We can't take that person and just say, oh, whatever, it's fine. Now, do I think there's a point in the amount of years where you start getting diminishing returns? Yes. Putting someone in time, putting someone in prison and just basically warehousing them for 20 years does not give you a better person, does not give you a better outcome at all, right? So I think educating folks, I think helping people learn trades, helping people get the mental help. That's something that's not even talked about. Like you see a lot of talk about education institutions. You see a lot of talk about trades in institution trade learning different trades. However, there's zero, at least from my experience and what I've seen, zero focus on just the mental health that people need, right? The mental um, health issues that a lot of inmates have, and that's not being addressed at all. And then to go a step further, even the health issues that exist, there's a number of horror stories that people not getting the medical attention they need because again, the current construct of prison today is warehousing. You're literally just warehousing people for X period of time, and you feed them, and you barely give them any access to medical care or healthy food or anything, and then you expect that okay, when your time is up, okay, go out there and be productive, and it just doesn't work that way. It might have been it's one of those European countries. I think it was Denmark, but they have a very positive model for incarceration, and it's more focused on rehabilitation. And I think that's important. I think if you have someone who is convicted of sex crimes, that person needs mental health. Period. Right? You can't just say well there's just okay, just don't do it again and put them back on the street. No, that person needs mental health, and that person needs structure, and it needs the attention to be able to trust that person in the world with the rest of us again. And I think that's the big part of it is that giving people the help that they need so that we can trust them, as our neighbors again. We can trust them, around us again. So are tons of people given punishments that don't fit the crime? Absolutely, particularly black people, 100%. That happens all the time. Federal prisons is a really good example of that, where you had the crack law, where the only difference between crack cocaine and cocaine was baking soda, and it was giving guys significantly more time for that because crack was a black drug and cocaine was a white drug, right? So some people get slapped on the wrist, and now you see the same thing with opioid addiction, where now they're treated like, oh, they need mental health and they need help. And when black people have the same addictions, like, no, we're gonna put you in jail for 20 years. So in that regard, the justice system, yes, completely flawed. But we do have to have a system where we can rehabilitate people where they can't bring harm to themselves or the general population. That's for sure.
Have you given any thought personally on your own what that system might look like?
Um, I think it's more I think it's more of a secure campus type of feel. So I'll tell you like what I've seen. So when I first went in federal prison, they have like four different security levels. So the first one is called the penitentiary, or that's high. Then you have a medium, and then you have a low, and the fourth one is the prison camp. So the big difference between the penitentiary or the high and the prison camp, which is the lowest you can go, is that on you see a penitentiary, there's huge walls, barbed wire fences, is this massive huge thing, right? Nothing gets in or out, right?
Right.
Um,
It's probably what people think of when they
Exactly.
think of.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So all the stereotypes when you think of prison, that's what it looks like, right? And then you have the camp, which camp looks like a college campus, right? The only thing separating you from walking off, there's a red painted line, and it's just understood, do not cross this line, right? And yeah, and that's where all your white collar crime goes. That's where, assuming you don't have a violent crime or anything like that, your last part of your sentence, it'll be served there if there's room and accommodations, etc. So now these camps, they're really focused on you're probably a year from being released, 6 months from being released, and these camps are usually situated in places where you're supporting something else. So, for example, a lot of times the prison camps will be situated on military bases. So you might be the lawn service for the military or some sort of maintenance workers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you that contrasts to The penitentiary, oh, there's nothing. You're on 23-hour lockdown. You barely get an hour of sunlight a day, and it varies depending on what's going on. So now, are there violent offenders that need more security? Absolutely. Are there are there offenders that are not violent that don't need as much security? Absolutely. I think there should be levels of security as far as you have to build the idea of trust. So the less we can trust you, the more security you have. The more we can trust you, the less security you have. But what they all should have in common is that the fundamental point of it is rehabilitation. So you're gonna get the mental health that you need. We're gonna, feed you better so that, because you think better when you eat better and you're healthy. So we're gonna feed you better. We're gonna not house you in inhumane conditions. There's prisons in Louisiana and other hot states that don't have air conditioning, that don't have clean running water. Like we're going to house you in humane situations where you can start learning and getting the help you need to be a positive member of society. We're going to give you access to trades. Like in federal prison, they would do trades where you could become an electrical journeyman, you could be a carpenter journeyman, plumbing, the list goes on and on. They even had guys that were doing CDL licenses, right? So those are things that I think been helpful. We had a guy that was, when I got down to the low, we had a guy that was volunteering from Eastern Arizona College when I was in Stafford, FCI, which was a federal prison, the low. So I wasn't at the camp yet, but I was between the medium and the camp. And this guy would come in and he would teach us how to use Microsoft Excel, how to use Microsoft Word. I use that every day now, but I learned that in jail. So again, that was something that I was able to use my time and something that could be that could be forward looking and that could be a benefit to me versus me just sitting being locked in a cage and playing cards and just waiting for my time to expire with me not coming out any better than I went in, right? They started me at a high only because of my age. When I was incarcerated, I was 23. So because I was 23, they assumed me to be more wild and rowdy. So they're going to put me at a high. Does someone who has a 5-year prison system should be sharing a cell with someone who has a life sentence who has really nothing to live for? Maybe not. I don't know. Like that could.
Yeah, yeah, that doesn't sound equitable to me.
But so
Yeah,
they
yeah.
get that they got it wrong with me, right? So they get that classification wrong. So I guess my point would be we do have to have a system in place. We do have to have a structure in place. I think if we led with rehabilitation versus just housing, I think if we made investments in that, I think that would be a better return investment for society as a whole. Because again, majority of people are coming home at some point or another. They will be on the streets with you. So the person that had that sex crime, the person that had did that violent crime, the most heinous things we can think that we saw on news that what people have done, we want that person to get the mental health what they need, right? So to say that we should just get rid of prisons, I don't know if I agree with that, because there is a place for it. Again, I've lived with people in there that I would not want next to you for your own sake. So it's just like, it's a place for it. But there also was not getting the mental health they need. I don't think we should give up on humans, period. I just don't think we should give up on them.
The part about they are coming home. They are coming home. Most of them are coming home someday. And when you look at it from that point of view, that definitely should, at least for me, play a part in altering your perception on things. And I'm sure it helps to keep your eye on the prize by having a team of individuals, many who share a similar story to you.
Absolutely. So about a half of our team are previously incarcerated. So they definitely understand and are dedicated. And they've really been dedicated. We've been lucky enough to, most of the people we have now have been with us from the beginning. So they've been with us for the long haul. And we have, previously incarcerated in every department. So from engineering to customer service to operations everywhere. So, and that's important. That's important for us, because they understand why we do what we do, and I also, you know, I wanted us to serve as an example of the amount of talent that's getting released. There's about 60,000 people that's being released from correctional facilities every year, and I think it's important for people to look at the returning citizens as talent. There's a lot of talent that's coming out, a lot of brilliant people that's coming out. Some of the most brilliant minds I've met have been incarcerated, that I met while I was incarcerated. And I think helping people point that talent in the right direction and helping them learn the language and fill whatever gaps they need to fill, could really do a lot for a business, for a small business. So I think I always push and promote that because I think that's really important.
What can we do, or what role should we play in supporting incarcerated persons?
I think it can be very basic things. So, for example, if you personally know someone that's currently going through that, reach out to them. Let them know that you're thinking about them. Let them know you crossed their mind. That can make a huge difference if they're currently doing time. If someone who is already released and trying to get their life back together, be a reference. Help them. Let them know if your job is hiring. Most folks that want to get their life together, they're going to outperform because they have more to lose. And so don't be afraid to extend a helping hand. Will you get it right all the time? No. But the people who aren't incarcerated, you refer them and they don't get it right all the time either, right? So this just try to remove the stigma from whatever that past may be and just focus on the fact that they're here now and the whole goal is to be a productive member of society and to not reoffend, right? So I think it's small things that can be done and just you know if you're an employer, and you're looking for talent, don't overlook the probation officers. The probation officers, they have tons of people who are actively looking for jobs that have to get jobs even as a condition of their probation. So, I think those are very simple things that just people overlook. I think, when it comes to legislation, be involved. Um, you know, you'll split the room when if you ask people like, how much power does our vote have? But I think withholding votes are just as powerful as giving votes too. And I think to put the people that we want that cares about the issues of Black folks is really important. And I think we need to be more deliberate and bold about that as well. Um, and also people who just care specifically about Black issues, not just we're gonna help everybody type approach. I mean that has its place, but I also think us supporting the people that are particularly and bold and unapologetic about dealing with Black issues in America. That's who we really need to put our full support behind.
Thank you, Frederick, for taking the time to speak with us today on Black History Year.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That was Frederick Hudson, creator of Pigeonly. To get started with Pigeonly or learn about the projects underway, visit www.pigeonly.com. At Push Black, we agree with Marcus Garvey when he said, "A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." We believe telling empowering stories on Black life and history can build a more liberated Black future. Being here with us lets us know you probably feel like that's important too. You matter. Your choice to be here matters. It lets us know that you value this work. And you make Push Black happen with your contributions at blackhistoryyear.com. Most people do $5 or $10 a month, but really, everything makes a difference. Thank you for supporting the work. Black History Year is a production of Push Black, the nation's largest nonprofit Black media company. Our team includes Tariq Alani, Brooke Brown, Tasha Taylor, Somalia Ramin, Amber Davis, and Darren Wallace. Producing this episode, we have Sydney Smith and Lynn Webb for Push Black, and Ronald Young Jr., who also edits the show. Black History Year's executive producers are Lily Workna and me, Julian Walker. Peace.